All right, everyone. So just over 80% of new condo investors here in Toronto are losing money every single month. How did we even get to that? So that's one of the questions I would love to talk to you about this in this particular video. I did receive many questions that I would like to answer and just get into a little bit of data. So stay tuned and let's get right into it. All right, so it's a simple question. How is everybody losing money? And that is a huge percent. Think about it. Over 80% of new condo investors are losing money every single month. So what is the strategy? So every time you have the trade or you have somebody purchase something, there are different venues or different methods or different analytics that they might use when they're purchasing that particular condo or a real estate property. So one could be, I want to live in there, and that's about it. The second one is obviously investment. So now the strategies are different. Some say, hey, look, I just want to buy it and I want to flip it, want to make some cash and get out. Then there are these flippers that get in there, they do some renovations, and they try to improve that pricing based on their knowledge, their renovations, and all that stuff. So it's improvement. So then there are those that are betting on a long term. They say, look, I'm buying this, I got it, I got the cash, I will ride it out for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever the case is. So one day when I retire or my kids, go to university or college or whatever it might be, they have something. So that's long-term thinking and long-term investment. So then there are these that are, fast flippers in terms of the equity gains, which means I want to buy it within a year, 2, 3, I want to sell for profit. And they're only focusing on that lump sum gain in a particular complex, area, community, etc. But the question here that I have received is, how did we even get to this point? And it is not as simple as that. I mean, obviously the demand, interest rates, and all of that play a big role, right? Fear of missing out plays a big role. And there's so many other factors, but we have to go back a long time in order to figure out this pre-construction or new construction developments. So
beginning countdown.
What happened along the way? So that was another question. So what happened along the way? So if we go back, right, 2 decades, dealing with pre-construction, most of the builders and developers and whatnot, they would have a representative or a realtor working in a showroom, showing you, different floor plans, showing you what is available and all of that stuff. So that did work. They were compensated at that time for their weekends, or I don't know if they were, whether it's how many units they sell or whether they were working on a salary, but that's not even the point here. The point was they had a showroom, you would go inside, you would see the floor plans, you would see all that stuff, fine. So, but then what happened is then they were kind of trying to make that nightclub feel, right? They would try to pump up their next phase or their next release, right? So I remember, 2 decades ago, people would line up in front of a show unit or show center, and the bigger the lineup, the bigger the fear. Think about it for a second. And then I don't know what kind of methods they used, if they hired people to kind of sit there in a lineup few days before, so everybody else would say, oh my gosh, like these people are already lining up, so I better buy a tent and I better line up, right? Because this is going to go quick. But then what happened, once you would walk into that particular showroom or that presentation in that particular date and time, when they opened the door, you would, as a buyer, you would feel it. You would see what was going on in the showroom. You would have a little bit time, and people would make that conscious decision without Too much pressure, even though the pressure was applied, but you know what I mean? Not too much. But then the expectation from these buyers in phase one was that the phase two is going to be more money, because that was the expectation, right? So I'm not going to buy a house and then the phase two, it's the same value. I want to make money, 5%, 10%, whatever the case is. So that kept going on for a long time. And then the builders and the developers, obviously we went through some shakes, on a global scale, the pandemics and all of that stuff, like whatnot. But then only the elite could actually work when it comes to pre-construction. I mean, everybody was welcome, but only the top elites, the diamonds and the platinums, agents and brokers and so on and so on and so on, would be able to get a allocation, which means they would be able to secure a unit to sell to their buyers. So what would happen? The developers and the builders put a handbrake, said, hold on a second, we're going to choose the best of the best. We're going to give them the allocations. They will fetch these units to the buyer or buyers, let them submit offer via email to us, and then we're going to decide, one, if we're going to give them the unit. Two, we're going to decide even if, because you choose like one choice, second choice, and the third option. So usually three. You never get the first two. Like you'll always get the third one, right? And then you're happy. You're sitting there like, oh my gosh, right? Even though the unit doesn't make any sense in terms of a layout. So these developers and the builders would withhold as much as possible. They would expose only certain amounts out on the field. Brokers and agents or sales representatives and the whole shebang at the background would work, sell these units as much as they can. These buyers have no choice, right? They were like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to lose again. Like it's the phase four and I already lost X because the phase three showed it went up, the phase two showed it went up, and the phase one it went up. Oh my gosh. Like one was the best time to buy real estate in phase one, obviously, right? So why not start at phase four and hopefully we have another 38 phases and I'll make my millions. So that was that particular strategy, because that kind of hit the ceiling, right? Because even the builders and the developers were pressured to build more, build smaller, build for students, build for this, build for that. Like some of these condo units are smaller than what you would get in a hotel room. Like they're smaller than a single hotel room, right? Like not even a presidential suite, like the bottom of the barrel. Like it's embarrassing. Like you know what I mean? Like you're spending so much money, hard-earned money, and you're investing in something that you cannot even use. You cannot move into these units. Like it is crazy, right? So the pressure was literally done after between a shield, right? Like you have the developer pushes to the agents do the work, they submit offers, if they have 5 allocations or 5 units that builder picks for them, they submit 10, 20, 30 units. You probably went through that. You were probably rejected. You're like, oh, we don't want you, or we cannot give you any more, and stuff like that, right? So I was in those shoes too. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was in that shoes, right? And I said, look, I don't like these units. Can you give me something else? Nope. Either you want it or you don't want it, right? I had over 20 sheets in my hand, over 20 buyers in my hand. I told these guys, look, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So at that time, they said, well, I don't know, maybe we'll look somewhere else and whatnot. I said, you do whatever you want to do. Now, fast forward 2-3 years, they're calling me. They're like, you know what? We're actually blessed that we didn't pay X amount of dollars, an hour and a half from the city of Toronto. That there's no way for us to make that money back. Not anyway in a short period of time. But now the other question is, if it's 80% of investors are losing money, so how much on average are they losing a month? So I have the statistic here. According to the report, 81% of investors who took out a mortgage to buy newly completed condos this year, we're cash flow negative and we're losing on average $605 a month. This is up from last year when 77% of leveraged investors were cash flow negative and burned about $597 a month. So as you see, we're hovering somewhere around $600 a month for that particular unit. And I do believe that these prices will need to correct further. Unfortunately, this is a huge amount. We're talking 80%. 80% on average. This is an average. Somebody could be underwater $1,500 a month. Maybe. I don't know. And then we go back to the mortgage renewals, right? That's coming up. 2025 and 2026. There's 1.2 million mortgage renewals coming up. All right. So what will happen? Well, if we have the ones and the twos, back in the day, people were writing it all along, probably hard, but they were writing it. But now when they flip, when they remortgage their property, their existing home, matrimonial home, plus they have a tenant hopefully paying, they're still underwater on average for $600. And if they lose a tenant, I've done videos on my channel. Some of these complexes or units, they're 25 to 30% for lease, right? So even that segment is feathering down. Like these rents cannot catch the actual expense. So what do I actually think? When will everything feather out? How long is gonna take? That's a loaded and it's a hard question. So if I can throw it to you in 5 seconds, I believe it will be in the next 5 years. So I think by 2030, if you keep whatever you have, the rental will adjust. Maybe the equity, you would pay some off. That will adjust. The interest rates will stabilize and feather somewhere around 3 points. And then by 2030, you will be able to break even and maybe to have enough equity to be at zero today. So you have to seek advice. It will be your personal decision what you will do. Will you sell today, collect your chips, move forward, learn from the lesson, or just hang in there, try to survive? And technically, it does depend on everybody's situation. I don't know, you might have 5 of these. I know people were lining up buying 3, 5, 7 of these, right? So maybe your house is paid off. You don't have that type of headache. Maybe you have 7 people in a household working, right? And you have enough income to cover whatever comes your way. But I'm just telling you, overall, it will be business decision at this point. And I hope you can survive all of these hits and waves. So if you like this content, there's much more on my channel. Please continue, like, share, and subscribe, and see you all in the next one.